more important even than the psychedelic experience. Individually, we have to reclaim the primacy of direct experience. As people, the real universe is within your reach, always.
The violence of being silenced. My perspective on canceling is that it is one of the most cowardly, low vibrational attempts at exerting control over another that exists. Not only that, but it violates one of the most fundamental and uniquely human freedoms, the ability to speak for oneself, to represent one's own I amness. If there were a devil, he would extol and condone cancel culture. You can bet on that. Nicole Daedone is an accomplished author and community leader. Her organization OneTaste has revolutionized not only the conversation but the culture around American sexuality. And while we share a love for great sex talk and even greater sex, our mutually traumatic experiences of being publicly canceled facilitated an even greater affinity between the two of us. Mutually traumatic isn't really true, though. Nicole is going through quite an ordeal with a grace, I might add, that is inspirational. My guest has in fact been indicted, though not convicted, on forced labor and conspiracy charges, to which she pleads not guilty. Now, I'm not here to make a judgment, but were this to be true, I would be utterly shocked. Having communicated with Nicole and her team quite a bit throughout this interview process, before and after, I have to say that everyone seems very considerate and respectful. I know a couple of people also who have been a part of Nicole's organization and have gotten close to her personally, who have said great things about Nicole and her work. That's not to say that I didn't have moments of doubt about having her on the show. After all, it's the U.S. Department of Justice that's going after her. Yes, even me, someone who has been actually convicted of felony charges, someone who has been publicly canceled by my peers, had hesitations about having her on the show because of how it might affect me and how I'm perceived. But this is the exact goal of canceling. Nicole hasn't been found guilty, and even if she had, for one, our justice system is flawed immeasurably, and even if she had committed some great crime, is there a possibility that she has seen the error in her ways and is committed to recompense? There are many, many considerations that canceling removes from the equation when we are calculating trust in another person. Humans are complex creatures. Each individual deserves nuanced consideration through the context of their unique life experience. The history of cancel culture is interesting. Though most publicly leveraged by leftist America, its origins extend back to ancient Greece and even further. Ostracization or exile is the original cancel culture. Removal from the tribe is perhaps the single most threatening consequence that an individual can face. The immediate and utter loss of emotional, physical, and even spiritual resources can be so drastic that suicide becomes the only solution. And we've seen this in modern exacerbations of this practice. Bullying through false accusations has caused more than one young adult and even high-level CEO to take such drastic courses of action. There were certainly times when I considered ending my own life when the whole world seemed against me. What greater human need is there than to feel seen? Canceling is quite literally the most blatant form of gaslighting. You're obviously in the room, but everyone is pretending you're not. Ghosted. Only you become the ghost. A specter that no one else can see or hear, no matter how hard you jump up and down or scream and shout. It's maddening. And on top of that, false accusations? Well, that's just a recipe for self-harm. The ultimate cry for help. First known pop culture use of the term cancel apparently goes back to New Jack City, where Wesley Snipes' character Nino Brown says, "Cancel that bitch, I'll buy another one." A response to being criticized for pointless violence by his female counterpart in the film. Anyway, this isn't a history lesson, but it is interesting to note that this particular form of social justice that got real traction with the Me Too movement is the same violence of forced silence that has been perpetuated upon women, youth, and minorities for so long. Can we really hope to remedy injustices with the same measures in which they were met? This is a timely conversation as well, and one that I hope will provide my audience with some reflection on how we might be engaging with each other post-election. If there can be microaggressions, then there can certainly be micro-cancellations. I've heard it said that there are even large media outlets that are encouraging folks not to attend holiday functions of family members who may have voted differently. Canceling our very family. I'm not gonna lie, this election thing has really had me think a lot longer and harder about canceling. I've tried to relate my experiences of being canceled to my audience, but then that's the thing, right? Once you've been canceled, you've lost a significant portion of your audience and credibility. And good luck gaining it back. It's a super effective tactic, don't get me wrong. Like I said earlier, even myself, having been unjustly canceled, experienced hesitation when considering whether or not to interview Nicole. Being canceled in the newly developing field of psychedelics had a profound impact on my professional profile. As an autodidact in a line of work that is still, might I point out, illegal, well, you can surely imagine some of the looks and responses I've gotten over the years in trying to communicate the nature of my work. I mean, what percentage of the world even now sees psychedelics as legitimate medicine? Much less a practitioner like myself, who is some sort of hybrid self-taught Taoist Tafarian post-colonial redneck mushroom shamanister. Thing is, what was I even canceled for? The reason given to the public were vague at best, but the impact was like a red-hot laser being pointed right at my ego. That's right. That's what it was, and it still is. Anytime I'm feeling other than grateful for the experience. But it really did have a significant impact on my income and my credibility in a very, very small arena of highly influential psychedelic professionals. I mean, for a while, a couple of years, honestly, I was pissed. Fuck them motherfuckers was all I had for it. Truth was, I was really pissed at myself. Were I to, or when I do, go back through something like this again, I hope to handle it more like Nicole. It's not to say that I backed down, but I did let the voices of fear get in my ears. Advisors who preferred shadows to sunlight. Because I had nothing to run from. I could have stood in the truth publicly, open-armed, and said, "Come at me, bros," with love. Knowing that this was a gift from God to help me grow, I can look back in a positive light. But what Nicole is doing, by embracing it in the moment, using her experience of being painfully canceled at a level I can't imagine to help others grow, now that's inspirational, and that is badass. And it's no surprise that this pushback is coming back from a badass woman. One of the things I've been terrified of speaking to publicly over the years is toxic femininity. As the survivor of an abusive relationship with a narcissistic wife and mother, thank you very much, I can tell you it's a very real thing. And it uses children and accusations, embroiling those children as a way to gaslight, manipulate, and cancel. Can you imagine intentionally canceling a good parent out of a child's life over spite? An expression of Kali-like rage, it misidentifies the source of conflict. A compassionless, scorched earth, mutually assured destruction blindly guides action, and in the wake is left ruin, most saddeningly the children. I believe canceling is one of the most common manifestations of toxic femininity. I know right now of 3 very good, loving fathers who have been falsely accused in one way or another of abusing their very own children by the children's very own mothers. I know that these allegations are 100% false. And this is what my ex did. She told such disgusting and false things about me to people that I knew and loved for years. People who then became afraid of associating with me. Then, when it happened at an international level, well, even when it comes from 2 men like Joe and Kyle over at Psychedelics Today, it's still the kind of cowardly, petty, entitled behavior of what one might attribute to mean girls, especially when one is trying really hard not to employ other more derogatory words that denote toxic feminine vibes. Isn't it just what mean girls would do? Psychedelics Today scrubbed 4 episodes praising my work, all in conjunction with vague public statements claiming I'm unsafe, contributing to vague and false claims of international paid-for hit pieces, privately leveraging their gatekeeping privileges to cut off professional opportunities for myself and my teammates, intentionally destroying my credibility. The spiteful behavior not only hurt me, and what hurt the most is the impact that it had on my teammates. Individuals who have so much knowledge, skill, and experience to share. I mean, have you noticed that Sanctuary is conspicuously absent from all Psychedelics Today media? One of the fastest growing, most professional and sincere sacred mushroom churches, and yet nothing from this psychedelic outlet that covers everyone in the industry. Despite multiple attempts at mediation, public conversation, reconciliation, nada. At first, I'm sure they'll say that some more vague stuff about my ethics and practices and what they've seen and heard, but never a conversation, never an open discourse, despite multiple offers. I mean, maybe they've grown in the past few years. I sure have. And I can say with a pure heart, thank you, Joe and Kyle. And Catherine. Can't forget you. Every fire needs a good stoker. Am I right? But no, seriously, being canceled has ultimately given me more confidence and certainty in who I am and what I bring to the world than I ever had before. Despite all that's been thrown at me, I keep coming back for more. I keep doing the work to spread the medicine and help people as much as I can. The only thing now, I'm going to be a lot more playful with it all, because now I know the goddess has got my back. Joe and Kyle, once again, I would be more than happy to reconcile with you guys. You've done great work spreading the psychedelic message for the most part. I just think that if you're going to present yourselves as an inclusive psychedelic media company, you would want to even include the voices that you don't agree with or fully understand, or maybe even those that you have a beef with. I'm happy to have anyone on my show. Listeners, I have no idea where you're coming into the psychedelic world from, but it feels really important for you to know that the majority of influential psychedelic voices out there, mainly academics, do not understand these compounds. They only work with them in theory, though they're more than happy to hand down regulations and restrictions on how others, even those vastly more experienced, do this work. I can only say this knowing that the more one explores these compounds, the more we realize how little we understand them, particularly psilocybin. The conversation with Nicole is going to prove really valuable to you, my listeners, and not just if you've been publicly canceled or accused. We all need reminders of our divine spark, of the courage that is the life within us to stand up for our principles. Which is the last thing I want to leave you with. Over the last few years, we've witnessed greater and greater efforts from the media and political outlets to silence the voices of perspectives that conflict with the official narratives. In many ways, this began with the gaslighting around UFOs. It may seem like a long-distance relationship, but this is one of the most public examples of crazy making that we have, which is what canceling false accusations and gaslighting ultimately are. The accused is crazy to be left for dead, while the accuser is actually usually just projecting their shadow all over everyone else. I've been guilty of such behavior, even regarding UFOs, believe it or not, a subject that is obviously now very personal to me and very credible, having had multiple shared encounters where we witnessed craft that defied physics. For so many years, some of our most highly experienced, highly skilled pilots, fighter pilots, have been seeing and reporting these objects and told they saw nothing. Yet what I'm about to share with you might be the thing that finishes me off, but it feels really important to speak to. As you know, I am a co-founder and a member of a psychedelic church. What you may not know, as didn't I before starting a psychedelic church, is that the religious freedom afforded by our nation's Constitution is unique in the world. Many of the rights enshrined in this founding document, we alone as Americans are privileged to. I have gained a new appreciation for the wisdom inherent in the United States Constitution. Among the unique rights supposedly inalienable to us as citizens of this country is free speech. It may be the cornerstone that all of our other rights hinge upon. If you can't speak up for yourself, well, you're going to have a hard time defending those rights, especially in a legalistic society like ours. I'm registered independent. My vote was for RFK. I followed him and I studied him pretty extensively. I know several people who are personal friends with him. What was done to this man's reputation for courageously speaking his findings based on science and fact, mind you, is reprehensible. The way he stood with integrity in the face of it all and has been willing to sit down and have live, publicly recorded conversations discussing these difficult topics is inspirational, to say the least. Now, I know that just saying this is going to get some people's blood boiling. But why? Let's ask ourselves, why do we get so upset at something or someone with a different view? Isn't it interesting that the two subjects we're told not to discuss, religion and politics, elicit the most vitriol? Perhaps it's not the subjects themselves, but how we have been polarized against each other by the very folks running those shows. Never in history have those who have tried to censor, cancel, or silence others been the good guys. Think about that. Never has the person doing the canceling ever proven to be the good guy. The good guys and girls and gals, let all of the voices be heard. If there ever is a concentrated attempt by individuals or organizations to present us with only one side of the story, especially when that story is nothing but negative, with not even one objectively positive recount of that person under scrutiny. Well, eventually, critical thinkers anyway, have to start asking questions. And it usually takes very little to get to the truth. Just talk to the person being trashed for one. Trust me, they want to share their perspective, and it deserves to be heard. You can still disagree, but maybe, just maybe, we can have a mind opened to change. That's when the magic happens, when we break the spell of propaganda. The thing that cancel culture knows and leverages is that once you've been publicly accused from a reputable media outlet, unless given ample opportunity to show otherwise, human nature is to judge you guilty until proven innocent. It feels important to acknowledge my own susceptibility to media propaganda and censorship as well. It would be misleading, to say the least, were I to pretend to be invulnerable. In 2016, I believed everything that was said against our upcoming president. Courtney and I cried the morning after his first election to office. And I held the perspective that he was an abhorrent, misogynist, racist, and fascist like it was dogma. Of course, I had seen the censorship and misinformation handed down from the authorities during COVID. And this is what ultimately drove me to look for other information sources. Podcasts have been a godsend. In terms of free speech, there may not be a more effective vehicle for disseminating a variety of perspectives and factual information that is often conveniently left out of mainstream media. I'm not saying I like the guy at all. He reminds me so much of all the toxic traits of my father, of toxic masculinity in general. It's honestly difficult for me to listen to or watch him. But the fact is, when I went to look for the actual trail of history that this individual has left behind, yes, there was sexism and ugly talk. But there was a considerably longer trail of beneficence to a huge array of individuals from what a variety of cultures. How many folks are even willing to momentarily consider that they may not have the full picture here? That perhaps our perspective has been crafted for us. Especially now that he is appointing a very married, very gay man to the highest cabinet position that a homosexual has held within the U.S. government. Who knows? Maybe he is the Antichrist. But it didn't take very much digging to see that the Democratic Party has been gaslighting its own people, at least since Bernie Sanders' first bid. I still believe with a truthful representation, Bobby could have won it for the left. It really upsets me quite a bit to see how that man and his supporters were treated, myself included. For what? Trying to bring actual scientific scrutiny and legal accountability to vaccine manufacturers? Can you see how effective canceling is? The real injustice, the real violence that is canceling is negating the whole dynamic person who deserves to be considered in context. Bobby Kennedy threw a dead bear in a park. Big fucking deal. What's the whole story? I once found a dead fox on the roadside, put it in the trunk, took it home and cut off the tail and threw the body in a ravine. In 6th grade, I made out with my second cousin. Once I put a large live snapping turtle into the foyer of an old woman's house, knowing she would come home from work at midnight and freak out. And I've devoted countless hours to improving the quality of life for my family and community. What I'm trying to say is that we are incredibly complex creatures. I believe and I have seen that every one of us is as light as we are dark. There is always a balance. Yes, Donald Trump has an incredible shadow that he is obviously not afraid of showing the world. But what I found out is that in trying to understand the whole person, I have to admit that he also has a significant light, one that he's not as comfortable sharing with the public as he is the shadow. But don't take my word for it. Look into it. It's out there. Similarly, Nicole, myself, and even you, dear listener, have done things, said things in the past, especially when taken out of context, another tool of the crazy makers, that could lead to being expelled from the tribe. And trust me, it takes an insane amount of courage and faith in a higher power than one's own ego to come out of an experience like this for the better. You're about to hear that courage and faith in the voice of my guest, Nicole Daedone. You're about to hear and feel her confidence and strength in her vibration. She's not perfect. She's not your guru. She is a powerful feminine force who has helped thousands, tens of thousands of people find liberation, a personal connection to the goddess through conscious sexuality. And I suspect her work is just getting started. Last thing, do Nicole and I a big favor, please help to counter our cancelers, can you? Tell people about this show, comment, like, do all those things that aid the algo. Those of us who have been silenced appreciate your sharing our work the most. Hope you enjoy this. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. I truly trust and feel confident that this is going to bring value to your life. Thanks for listening.
Nicole, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I could not. When I saw your Instagram posts, canceling as a spiritual process, I think, or as a spiritual practice, I do not ever click on things that I see. I don't ever make time for late night panels or whatever, and I saw that and I was like, I have to go to this. I have to go to this because of all of, I think, I don't know, I hesitate to say all, but in my attempts to become a more actualized human being, nothing has tested me like this canceling. And so please, I'd love for you to share our audience a little bit of your story, how you got into this work, let's call it. It's not an offshoot of your actual work, but it is becoming, it seems like, work for you.
Well, I think it's part of it. It's a revolution. And so, however many years, 30 years ago, I discovered a practice. The practice was Om, and it involved genital stroking that involves mystical states. And I knew, I was going to be a Zen nun, but I knew this was the way. But I also knew, I wasn't naive. This was not an easy road to go down. And then I think it was around 2016, I started seeing these tribunals on Facebook. And then I would see these people just crawl and beg for mercy. And I would write to them, don't do that. I'm Sicilian. Don't do that. And they're like, okay, you can say, I apologize. I messed up, whatever you want to do. Like Trumfa, he's one of my favorite teachers. He says, it's okay to feel remorse and regret for 6 seconds and then change. Go.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized, this is some kind of S&M thing going on here, not the good kind, like, this kind of sadism. And then these people were so masochistic. And I just remember thinking, this is not going well. And I told, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask kind of what was the subject matter or the field where you were starting to see these tribunals, so to speak, taking place?
Well, I was teaching at the time in the realm of using sexual energy. So I was seeing all of these people, and we're such weird and disparate communities. And so I was seeing it in these various communities open up. Oh, this person disrespected a woman, or this person didn't honor this trans woman's experience. And it started, that sort of like hyper vigilance started arising, and humor decreased radically, and humanity was lost in these conversations. And I thought I said this in the talk that I gave, but I also worked around the HIV activism time, and at that time, there was a chaos. There were these purple spots that would rise on people's faces, and you knew, oh God, it happened to them. So there was a way that I would see on these tribunals, oh God, it happened to them. It was discarding that, sort of this cultural infection was getting them. And then lo and behold, oh, here's the article about me. And it was, you know, it was, well, I'm sure it was an experience unlike any other. And if you haven't had it happen, I don't know that you can imagine it, because I couldn't have. And I was compassionate already with these folks, and it happened. And overnight, I was just under my table vomiting.
Was it completely caught you off guard? It was a complete surprise that this article came out, or did you have any knowledge that it was going to publish?
I knew it was coming. I didn't know that it would be as many of the things as it was. Uh, and I didn't, you can't anticipate the result. A friend of mine once said, like, you can't anticipate how you're going to respond to a bullet coming your way. You can imagine it, but you can't.
Or
And so, yeah.
I just yesterday I stumbled upon a podcast with Eric Weinstein, and I forget who the host was. It was called the Modern Wisdom Podcast. It's a British gentleman that does it, and there was a quote in there that I caught. And I mean, I just stumbled upon this, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is so perfect for the conversation tomorrow." And he says in here, the host says, "It's as they're talking about criticism capture. They're kind of not speaking of it. Same concept. He calls it criticism capture. Most people have occupations where they get criticized in private. To have it take place in public is a different dynamic. One's response to criticism is important almost in defining what they do in their field. The game isn't what you do, it's what you do after what you do gets defined by people who hate it." And I thought that was such a great synopsis of what it is. And you have people so often, and I do try to be really compassionate in this conversation. And there are certainly marginalized people. My minor was in Pan African Studies. I lived in Jamaica for 7 years. I worked in low income schools. I know that's a reality, but I know that there's also um, there's a parallel reality that's running alongside of all that disadvantage, and in between seems to be this kind of, I want to say, manufactured gap of, even as like Eli sent me the link to Wharton's stuff, I think John Wharton's stuff of racism as the new religion. All right. And so it seems like
I think it's anti-racism.
anti-racism, or sorry, anti-racist. But as I'm trying to explore, like, the getting from a disadvantaged state to a successful place in life, just call it, the true barrier is not where you're at, but your belief about where you're at. Right. And so this projection that's coming out. Anyway, I'm going too far. I want you to talk more about your experience here and how this has become such a practice in spiritual growth for you. So yeah, just kind of move into that if you would.
Um, by the way, there's somebody named Tabor. I can't remember his last name, but he does phenomenal work on mindset with the African American community, in terms of a form of racism being holding others in an oppression mindset. So,
Really?
yeah. But so you said about how did this become a spiritual practice? And it did the minute it happened. I said, I knew immediately, don't get bitter. I could see this was going to be there was this life would not be the same after this. And, Ram Dass, after he had his stroke, he said, I'm not the same Ram Dass I once was, and I'm not the same Nicole Daedone I once was. There's a line of demarcation, but I get to choose if that line is better or worse. And the line is far superior. There are things that this experience takes from you that you wouldn't be able to release from your gripping hands that needed to go. So, um, and I used to not want to admit that because I wouldn't want to give them the satisfaction. Even that had to go. It all had to go. And so in the I tell this story that a few days after it happened, I was watching John Tarrant, a Zen teacher, and he said, I want you to imagine that you've been falsely accused. And he said, feel that feeling. And I'm not having to imagine. And he said, feel that feeling. And it was just this heat. And I felt the actual sensation of rage and terror at the same time. And he said, that's your instinctual karma. Normally, most of the time in our lives, we don't have access to that. We can't clear it. But in situations like that, you can. I remember thinking, oh, that's my wisdom to carry through this.
And so have you navigated that, engaging with that rage and how, like, your initial responses? And because I'm really curious about the process that you've gone through
Right.
as you move through this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been in it for 7 years and it's only increased. So it's
Still,
not,
right.
it is not light fare by it's a full-time job. Um, and it's and part of it has to be the sense of self leaves. There's no way you can survive this and keep a sense of self. And, the first thing that flies out is uh, any kind of status. My phone had 4,500 people in it. 2 weeks later, it had 40. It was, people just fled or any kind of right because the betrayal is so unimaginable. The thing like nobody, you feel contagious.
Mhm.
And so every one of those turns, I'd have to figure out how to release it uh, without bitterness. And that was really my vow. And I kept saying to myself, they don't want to win at this. They want to see somebody stand up after this and demonstrate what it looks like to stand up after you've been destroyed. And so that's been my motivation.
I just can only imagine the day-to-day experience, knowing how it's felt on my end for what has been very painful, but nowhere to the extent of what you're going through. And the hope has been, in my experience, that the detractors or whoever it is, those people that are out there making noise, would consider the human and the families and the real life experience that is behind the other side. And that seems horribly lacking in most situations. Interesting. It's interesting to me that we're here talking the night of the first presidential debate, well, the
Right.
second, but this whole situation. And cancel culture, or I'm sorry, I should say censorship, feels like
Oh,
just it's the next extension of this cancel culture, right? Um, and I'm not sure. Like, I want to have faith that we are able to really rise above this, that we are able to okay, sorry. Kind of get in touch with our humane selves. But I'm kind of losing hope because it doesn't feel right. Bobby Kennedy is the only person in any significant position that I've seen in the last 10 years that I feel is actually speaking in a compassionate, mindful way. I guess, what are your thoughts on how this is impacting culture at large, and maybe art? What can we do to move things in a different direction?
Mm. Well, I wrote a lot of books on this. I've thought about it at length because the challenge is that we keep finding short-term solutions, and there's really only one solution, and that's to pull out bias at the root. Just the core of bias, and from there everything else will fall into place. We don't make that a priority because it takes a period of time to go through that process. That we have psychedelics, meditation, we have these various processes to begin to do that. And I think I'm very hopeful. There's a beautiful piece by Nick Cave where he talks about the fact that he can't afford cynicism, and he calls it a cheap evil. I like that, and he says this right after his son dies. And there's a way that we can use this duress, and this is I don't know that this is the best example, but Kanye also talks about what dragon energy is the capacity to take duress and use it in your favor. And I think, and then there's a bigger picture, because the bigger picture, I think, is that we're shifting from the old guard of consciousness into a consciousness that's more about creativity. I think the feminine will lead. I think a lot of things are coming into play. And I think you're feeling the tumult of that transition and inertia itself. I don't attribute it to anybody, any people. I don't want to give them that much power. It's just inertia. And so it's a matter of just keeping focused on where you want to go in the midst of slings and arrows.
So is this just a natural part of transitioning into a new stage of consciousness?
For sure.
Seems that I think Eli sent me something that um just kind of speaking to the ones who are canceled or ostracized, or like you said before you got on, are the ones that are making the real moves, and the work around sexuality, particularly, I think what I appreciated about the oming when we were involved in a small group here, yeah, it's amazing the connections that we've had, but is that feminine focus, and in my work with psychedelics and what I've been very pretty deeply uh studied, involved into UFO phenomena. I've had several experiences myself, and uh, the overwhelming majority of these experiences, liminal experiences, are very feminine. And
Yeah.
it seems to me, some of what I've seen in the psychedelic space is that there is a the resurgence of the feminine is happening right in front of us. And your experience, this is such an interesting, I'm not sure how to articulate it, but in a lot of ways, there's so much inversion happening, so many things, the roles are being flipped, and you
Yeah.
going through this experience, which, as I suggested, and please point out where I'm wrong, but because it originated so much in Me Too, the anti-racism, the gender issues, men have been the public figures who have received the most backlash or cancellation.
Mm.
And I'm really curious, as a woman going through this experience, like how is that, how are you relating to this, or how does your femininity, how does that play into this experience that seems like, from the outside, majoritively experienced by males? Does that make any sense? It's so
Oh,
hard for
for
you.
sure.
Okay.
Was compared to Harvey Weinstein.
Sure, of
Yeah.
course.
So I understand. Yeah. I think, I don't know. I think like I said, I'm fortunate that I'm Sicilian and that I'm really clear headed. I've been doing what I've been doing for 30 years. There's no doubt in my mind about who I am or where I'm at. I think that's where they get you. I think there has to be some fundamental level of shame that can be hooked into that that doesn't, because I have to wake up every day and do the fight. Wake up every day, and then to put it into the context of, oh, this is a normal part of the process, like what psychedelics went through. It had to go through this process. The yoga even went through this, right, and meditation. And so this is just our time to go through this. That's how I, you know, look at it. As a woman, um, it's I think the most difficult part is that it's women reporters who took me down. And it's oddly a sad indictment of how mm, how needed this work is, that we're crabs in a barrel, and we would take another woman down who's actually liberating women, and that we would do it because it was a quick fix story, hot money potential, and because they know, I mean, they're reporters, so they know that their reporting is poor. So then there's the element of seeing that kind of shark-like nature in women, and knowing that the only way I'm gonna really get free is fundamentally if we set the way for them to get free too. And so it's almost like you have to love thine enemy in order for the process to go through. And it's like there's a Whitman quote, forgive me if I contradict myself, or if not, I am the masses, or I am the myriad. But it's like women have all of these things inside of us. I understand why they did what they did. I don't think it's right, but it's it is. Yeah.
I have this deep desire for there to be public discourse amongst the discrepant parties. Um, and the interesting thing about all this is generally the accuser, is not willing to share the stage or share the microphone. And you would think that would be enough for most people to draw some conclusions. But it's amazing how quickly folks jump on board. And, just like you had said about, having 400 to 40, going from 400 to 4,000 to 40 contacts, um, the, the pain that leaves someone with, the experience that leaves someone with when they are most in need, to see people who they supported, I'm sure people that you supported, fled from your side.
People who said they would name their children Nicole.
It's it's kind of brought to me anyway. This one side of me has a much more realistic perspective of people, and I know that the overwhelming majority of people are not going to stay when the times get tough.
That's right.
But the deep appreciation that is provided for those who do, because
Right.
sure, we have people in our lives that have continued to stick with us, is what gives me a restored faith in humanity. I don't know, this whole political environment right now is, to me, is such an interesting kind of testing ground for this. Um, and I do hope that we move to a place where we can just have active dialogue, around whatever our contradicting viewpoints are. And then at the same time, you got some people that just want to be vindictive. And it's like Eric Weinstein was saying in the conversation just earlier. He was asked how do you respond, and he's like, there's just not really a great way to respond, because if you don't respond, then you're extra guilty, and if you do respond, it's going to be taken and turned against you. And so I think I heard you say in that call the other night, on that panel the other night, that or maybe it was another guest, that we just have to keep doing the work and letting time prove out.
That's it. And really, it's not any different from anything else. It's just garden variety suffering. It just has a new flavor, and I don't know. I look at it like people who go through it they're more advanced in some ways in their karma to be able to call that particular experience in. It's I wouldn't. It's you must feel this way. Like, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but I wouldn't deny it for myself. Be- In that I never could have, I just never could have become, first of all, disillusioned enough. I have a friend who said, I wish you much disillusionment, meaning the removal of illusion. I had, I run a program that turns prisons into monasteries. I had no idea how things worked. Like, I grew up with Walter Cronkite, who was like just a good old solid guy of the news. I just saw it, and I'm not particularly naive, but I discovered I was very naive,
Mhm.
and a lot of that had to burn away. And then there's a certain level of backbone. So in terms of being a woman, that's what had to develop. You
Mhm.
know, these various forces coming at me are about as masculine
Right.
as you can get, and then saying these things about me, and, they're speaking to a sexual woman.
Mhm.
There is no me here, but they're very compelling forces, and you really just wanna roll over, die, give up, agree, and to learn to stand up in the face of that, nothing, there's you could never scare me again with anything.
Could you talk about the role of sexuality and maybe it's I don't think it's even sexuality. This idea of eros or of this vitality is actually being what's being fought against. And now it feels like you, because of the subject matter, the direct nature of the work that you're doing, it's immediately tied to sexuality, eroticism,
Right.
etc. Um, but as I've reflected on my experience, and so Mantak Chia is a longtime teacher of mine. I'm all into the Taoist transmutation and whatnot. I talk a lot about sexuality on this podcast. My wife and I are polyamorous, very openly so, and have received a ton of criticism for that. But ultimately, it feels like there is an attempt to tamp down the light that is coming from unexpected sources. It's like if you're in the club and you're start to shine, then you can get away with a lot more. But like I came out of nowhere in the psychedelic world, just out of Kentucky, started these retreats, started doing all this stuff, and people are like, "You can't do this," and it feels like it's an attempt to snuff out that vital force. And I don't know, does that relate to your experience and how and so speak of that, if you would, this kind of relationship of eros to cancel culture.
Oh, it's the fundamental war that's happened since time immemorial, right? Because it's cancel culture is really a religion, and it's these different factions of a single religion. And the religion really has to do, one of the questions I ask is, what would you have to believe about people to believe these things, right? And so there's a certain kind of uh, mindset you'd have to believe that people are fundamentally powerless, that people don't make their own decisions, that they don't have volition, that they don't have agency. There's a whole series of things that you can believe that are true if people don't have sexuality. If devoid of sexual energies, you can't. So this is, we have tons of science on this now. So you have the arousal impulse, and this is true both in psychedelics and in sexuality. It's one of the only things that's strong enough to break through the valence of the ego in order to write your own script about your experience, your own narrative, right? Either rewrite the past or write the future. And but, like, scientifically, that is the holy grail, right? It's called flow or the mystical
Mhm.
state. Well, what I was teaching, yeah, through the roof. It's like, I don't know if they showed you, you might think it's interesting, but the equivalent of 4 doses of psilocybin in terms of the MEQ, which is very powerful. Yeah. So where you're at, it isn't about sex at all. It's about liberation. And a lot of people were having profound experiences. And one of the things that I heard that I thought was very interesting, the FBI followed Jordan Peterson for a period of time, or this is what they said on a podcast. I don't know. And the person was asked why, and they said, oh, because he was having too much of an influence too fast. That was their perspective. I don't know if that's true, but I do know that when you rise as a bright light, um, a culture looking to keep a culture's job is to keep homeostasis if it can.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so its job is to snuff you out, and then your job is to keep going like a
Mhm.
bat out of hell, and
Mhm.
that's how you make it through your own gauntlet. And then that's how you prove the truth, proof of product, that's how you prove the truth of what you're talking about. So I've always looked at it like, okay, people are looking to see if I'll make it, if I'll make it intact, I'll make it with humor, if I'll make it with love, then they'll know, okay, what I'm talking about actually works.
It's funny how humor has no place in this
Life.
suppression, right? Like that.
No place. Nuns. They're not a funny scene. In fact, at one point, I don't know if I should say this, but at one point they said, Nicole, you have to stop telling jokes. Like I'm supposed to look, but in Sicilian culture, you would just hang yourself as not tell jokes because that's how you move it through your body. In trauma theory, polar bears shake, but in human theory, you're supposed to laugh or cry. That's how you move it through. So yeah, no, it has not been funny at all.
No, it is, and particularly like, well, obviously I don't know your experience directly in the sexuality world and the home space, but in the psychedelic world, the lack of humor is absurd in and of itself. All of these the new psychedelia that's all around stuffed shirts with their MRIs and like they got blindfolds and earbuds or whatever, and it's just like we're really missing the fucking point here. And I know that so much of what brought the pushback on me, because I do think that we like play is also the flow state. Play is also how we transcend and pave new pathways in our mind experience. And so like play and sexuality, all of this stuff, we're just like we've just taken things so seriously as a culture for so long, and
What?
it feels kind of like we're coming to a bit of a pendulum swing, but I don't know that maybe there never is really a true pendulum swing in this regard. If, like you're saying, this is just kind of the natural evolution of culture, we stretch out and, there's those that try to stop, that growth and stretch, but it invariably keeps moving because folks like yourself and myself are just going to keep on doing the things that they know that they're sent here to do.
Right. Well, I think, by the way, I wrote a book called Play, and because I think play is the highest form of consciousness. Alan Watts said some things are far too serious to be grave about, and I do. To the depths of my soul, I believe that's the path and the practice. There's no other way. And in fact, that's one of the things that we talk about making canceled into a spiritual practice. I had to view it as a game. There was no other way, or there was no other way to make it through. Otherwise, documents and the like, it's terrible. But to begin to see like, okay, there's these forces against these forces, and they have these powers, and we have these powers, and just to begin to see how to exist inside of it. I think that's a major portion of what kept me sane.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so how does this integrate into your work?
Everything, everything. But it's funny. It's like there's this Norman Fisher wrote this book called Coming Home. It's his Zen book, and he talks about the idea Odyssey, and the idea you go around in a circle to end up right back where you started, only you're changed. And that's how it feels. It's like this is not the same person I once was, and everything's profoundly familiar. I still live by the same principles.
Has it changed how you relate to your clients or the people that you work with?
Well, I don't work with people so much anymore. I mean, that's one of the big things. Mostly what I spent the past 7 years, I wrote 16 books. That was what hit me was I just took every single misunderstanding. That place where you're just like, I can't believe they're saying this or think this, or this is so frustrating. And how could they even be vindictive? And then, and so I wrote in such a way as to clarify the actual intention, but not like this is really what happened, but to demonstrate, no, this is actually how it's done on a feminine path. This is how it's done on it. So that was great. Yeah, I don't know, teach again per se. You know, sometimes people write to me on often actually on Instagram and just say, will you do coaching? No, I won't do coaching, but I'm happy to do a phone call. And so we, you know, like that. But yeah, yeah, I don't know. I'm right now this full time job.
Say that again.
Right now, the
Full
time job.
You know, it strikes me. I'm going to be really honest right here, right now. Like, and I would invite your critique. Is this is this a is this me trying to get back? It's me trying to express. So one of the things that was said about me in a Vice documentary was that I had a guru complex, and I was trying, and like I told people all the time in Jamaica, I was like, kick the fucking the pedestal out from underneath of me every day. I want you to, and I'm kicking it out too. Do not put me, you know, I would intentionally smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol so that I would not be perceived as some guru, right? So it just like blew my fucking mind. It was one of those things that, like, when you see this, I'm like, this is insane. They're saying the opposite of everything that I tried. And so I recently revamped this podcast and called it the Not Your Guru, right? And they're definitely like the entire premise of my work has been and is even more so now empowerment of the individual to work with psychedelics, particularly psilocybin, on their own terms. They develop a relationship. You don't need some medical professional telling you how to take mushrooms.
Right.
There's
The democratization of psychedelics.
Yes, there's basic safety, right. And that has been, of course, a big thorn in the side and especially as our church continues to grow. You know, I really believe that the religious route or the spiritual practice with psychedelics is the future of psychedelics. All the mental health stuff, it's kind of it's to be seen as secondary. But you know, we all have this desire to be seen as we see ourselves, I feel like. And there are ways that we can go about that are, God, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that when we have been publicly defamed, ridiculed over who we are, and the opposite of who we are is what's being presented, then the natural tendency is to fight back or present yourself in a way that is attuned with who you are. And so this, just even exploring what you're doing in this work initially, has given me a lot of reflection on how I'm engaging in my process. So I do want to bring humor into it. I do want to stay lighthearted about it. And this podcast is part of that. It's just kind of hit me in real time that this is a part of that process for me.
Yeah, one of the things I tell myself is if I lose my sense of humor, they won. Like, I don't want to give anybody the satisfaction of bringing, like, you can do, like, I can't guarantee what's going to happen to me in the everyday world. That I can't guarantee. I can do my best, but I can't guarantee it. But I can guarantee everything that'll happen in here, and nobody will ever win there. That's my determination.
In terms of spiritual practice, and I don't want to read too much into, and I'd love for you to share kind of what your kind of working model is for your own unique spirituality. But have you in this process, I want to say, like, looked outside of yourself for support? And I don't mean in terms of like human beings around you. Is there a way that you understand the universe as a supportive factor? And if so, is that something that you consciously engage with in this process?
Yeah, I mean, I lived in an acid house when I was young for a long time, and that's how I came into all of this. What I saw, I thought everyone had to see, or I hoped everyone would see from that place. I had also been a Buddhist practitioner. I took it's called a Bodhisattva vow. And whatever is asked of me, I'm willing to do in order that others see what I've gotten to see. That was my motivation at the time. And whatever I saw then, I've continued to experience as a supporting force for sure. And then I only added to it. Some crazy things happened when I got canceled. Um, I don't know how, but Christians were wonderful to me, which is not what you would expect. I don't know. Is it? And there were some Christian people who, some of my Buddhist friends fled, but there were some Christians who came in and just regularly checked on me. And so, okay, I'm willing to open to these ideas. And I already I have a very strong spiritual foundation, but I just began to open more. And then, I work with a Lama and a Drupal. And so I work with various people. And the, I think the biggest part for me has been, I don't know if you'll know this feeling, but almost where you don't want to be a burden on people because your story is so heavy right now, or, you know, are you don't want them to have to deal with a reputation aspect of interacting, and you almost want to protect them. And I had one of these people say to me, Nicole, just let me help you. Like, that's what I want to do. Don't try to control me. And I thought, oh wow, I thought I was doing something good. And so I think the depths of benevolent aid that came my way. I have a reverend that marches with me. Well, I have to go to court. She comes with me. That's crazy. And this woman, Topeka Sams, she's a minister, and she just wrote a killer op-ed. And just these people coming, I think it's almost as much as I can take, it's there. The benevolent aid is really there. And I just have to, I'll just tell you this one last thing. And that's, so I went at this point though, because, there were several years apart, these articles or you know, these pieces of work. And so I was in Italy for one of them, and I was done. I was never going to teach again. I took a vow to always be available to help anybody. I was never going to teach again. I was never going to talk to anybody again. I was done. So my original teacher from the acid house found me. This is 20 years later. She finds me and she calls me and, hi, hon. She's 82. And so she kept saying she needed to talk to me for me to help her because she knew that she could get me that way. But really it was to help me and then one day she said, oh, hon, you'll teach again. And I said, never. And she said, oh, it hurts. It hurts, huh? She said, take your time. And just that pulled the thorn, because you have to be brave when you're here, right? You have to hold it together and just to be able to let go.
Yeah. And I found that bravery mixed with softness, bravery mixed with compassion. It's not that like, fuck you, I'm just charging forward.
No. No.
Which I don't want to go too far off that. I want to just kind of stay with this. What had you saw the benevolent aid, I think is what you said. Because there is a part of me, I have a hard time completely shaking my Catholic lens, and I have seen in the psychedelic world there are entities on other dimensions. There's an interplay, and this in many ways, I don't want to use like Christian hyperbole, but in many ways feels like a profound spiritual battle for the voice of humanity, for growth and progress. And so, like, what are your thoughts on this in bigger picture terms?
So I told you these Christians came to help, and one of them agreed to do Bible study on Tuesday night. We were just going to go through the Bible. I said, okay. So we did. And this is my conclusion was, Christianity exists for this particular trial in a human's life. That model of, wrestling in the desert, going against the masses when you're a small person because something's true, the archetypal images inside of the Bible. And what's so beautiful is, the story of Jesus. So everyone leaves the story of Jesus that he was crucified. Oh no, he was crucified. He went into the underworld. He met Persephone and did some tantric Buddhism, and but then he rises again as a simple gardener, which is so pretty. And so that idea that you have to go through all of these machinations of the world, but at the end of this process of wrestling and fighting and all of that, you get to be yourself. That's the greatest reward.
Mm. Oh God, I just want to speak to this because the thing ultimately, I want to say this publicly, just continue to acknowledge this myself
Mm.
that so the first publication that I was canceled by was Psychedelics Today. They're pretty well known. They're the biggest psychedelic media company out there. And they came to Jamaica, had a great time, spoke really well of me. And then whatever, they got bee in their bonnet from somebody at third party and ended up doing what they did. But as I reflected on that experience, I have to acknowledge, and I have, that I invited them to come to my retreat center because I wanted them I inauthentically wanted them to come and I wanted to leverage their audience. And it wasn't any kind of a real relationship. It wasn't any kind of a real connection. And they came down and I saw very quickly that we were not the same vibe. And everybody in that circle that I had gotten involved with were relationships that I had developed out of a desire to make myself acceptable in the psychedelic community because I was just
Brilliant.
Kentucky
Brilliant.
boy.
Brilliant.
So now, like, this return to authenticity, it was originally like that authenticity that came after all that mess while I had these retreats in Jamaica, like me just embracing that head on, being very public. I started to be more public, not like, hey, I'm polyamorous, but like it's an important topic that
Right.
it needs discussion. And I would work with a lot of people who were coming, they were unfaithful or they didn't know how to stop cheating, or it's like, there's a bigger conversation here besides your bad or, your marriage sucks or whatever. And that caused a lot of ripples in the working community where I was, to the point that that relationship ended and I'm not really at liberty or do I desire to go into that whole conversation there. But what it has ultimately led is now I am presenting everything as this is 100% me. My wife and I have a girlfriend. We love her. We have such a good time together. People go out and see us. We run a church, a psychedelic church, and we're polyamorous. And you know what?
Right.
It's not fuck you. This is what I'm doing now. Where that was my perspective years ago, was like, fuck you. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Now my perspective is, I love you and I want you to live your most authentic life. And so I'm going to do everything I can to model that for you.
That's the canceled enlightenment. That's it. Like I am, you made me think about 10 things, but so right before I got canceled, what like top Hollywood agents were after me. I had spoken at all places. The right people were saying my book was their favorite book. It was like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then, we all know where that he went. Goodbye. But here's the thing, like that thing of everything that matters to me and everything that I am, they would say, oh, well, if you could just turn this down a little bit, like, oh, I love your ideas. If you just wouldn't talk about this one, if you would do this one. And I was just like, I felt like a dog and pony show. And once that machine has you, oh, that's so I feel like I got sober from the world. That's this is what it's like.
Oh,
Where
wow.
no one can tell you. And so like my Instagram page, everyone had ideas about what it should be. I write what I want, exactly what I want, exactly as I think it, exactly as I feel it. And it's not like a sexy page, it's just my page. It's just and here's the thing, the people who come on it, I actually like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
I'm like, oh, you're interesting. Okay, this is
No.
cool. I like having a conversation with you here.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the blessing right there. The guy who I told this story when you were on, but with the underground guy who called me, who I didn't know, but who had seen my work and then seen me get canceled. The thing he said is, if you make it through, you'll never have to lie again. You'll never have to wear a mask again. You'll never have to. And what he didn't say is, and you won't be able to, which is a blessing. Like, I don't even have to worry that I'd put one on if I tried.
Why is that? What would prevent you from going on and putting on another mask?
I don't, there's not one in me.
It's just not there.
There's not a cause or a condition in here to do it. I mean, once you've seen the fool's gold of that world, like, why are you going to go digging around in it again?
Right. Yeah, and it's like whatever mask I wear, someone's going to eventually have something to say about it. So just have something to say about the no mask space, you know. That's it. Another thing I that came out of that panel that I thought was so telling. There was one of the panelists that said something to the nature of, you brought the secret wisdom out and shared it with the masses, or I forget, he was like relating to like Prometheus and the fire, but like I identified with that so much, and I have struggled with, do we actually have the right? Is it our place to bring this secret knowledge out? And I struggle with this with psychedelics. They were kept secret for so long, and even in cultures where they were endemic, it wasn't something that was like, you know, where psychedelia all around. It was a kind of sectioned off for a very special time. Mantak Chia has helped me come to terms with this, because he brings out many of these teachings that were very secretive. But I'm curious, like, your experience as a revealing this kind of secret knowledge, how does that play into this canceling experience? And there's more I'd like to talk about there. We'll stop right there if we could.
So that's a really good question, because I was trained, I'm trained in Tibetan Buddhism, various forms of Buddhism, but that's what I practice now. And the secret is there for a reason. It's important, it's so that you don't explode somebody's mind before they're ready to have the experience. And in Judaism, the only thing that's a sin is giving somebody more than they can have, so that they leave the wisdom place and don't return, right? So these are the things that guided my question. But I can say I saw the enfeebling of women coming long before it was coming, and I knew I had to get sort of the way out rooted in the ground before that hit. We could not. We have research at all of these places that'll help usher us into the world. We couldn't get that today, because just the prevailing conditions of the culture are just so, there's a war on sex, so there's no way you could get that. So I made a decision. I don't know. In some ways, I'm paying the consequences, and in some ways, the consequences would have been far worse had I not, in that I wouldn't have been able to live with myself, knowing, you know a way for people to find a way out. And look at you, you're not like a hippie dude. So I think you're chosen. I think that I was chosen for a reason, because I'm not like a sexy lady. I'm a deep eros practitioner. And because I care, because I want everyone free. I want the end of suffering, the causes of suffering, and to help others get out of suffering. That's what I want. So in terms of the secret, I think we're at the most crucial time in history. In Buddhism, it's called Kali Yuga, where you're either going to have 1,000 years of darkness or 1,000 years of light. But it's just a crucial time. I think we know that, period, right? And I think all resources are being democratized or being liberated because they're desperately needed. And all of the gatekeepers and the mediating sources are no longer that powerful. I even think the plants came to save us. And, it's
So
like that.
there's a species of psilocybin mushroom that was unidentified until 2000, I want to say 17. I don't know. I could go into so many, but this mushroom, I was one of the first people that came across it, and it started telling me where to go. Like, I'm in my living room, and it's telling me where to go. And now this mushroom is almost spread across the entire nation, whereas just a few years ago it didn't even exist, or well, to our knowledge, we didn't know anything about it. And there was a huge part of me that feels like there is a force that is intervening, providing us with tools and opportunities. And this idea of, just you are just chosen for this work. This is the work that you're sent here to do. How have you leaned on that in some of your really challenging times?
Oh, I think, you have one thread. There's that poem. It's something like, there's a thread, it runs through everything. You see it. Those who don't think you're crazy, but you follow it wherever you go. And it's like, I have one guiding principle. And so there's chaos out here, but I just keep, and I also, one of my best friends' name's Ed Brown. He's a Zen Roshi. And he says, I just do my best. I'm a good Ed. And so it's like that. Like, I do my best.
That's what I was hoping. Yeah. Cause it's like, it's not this idea of divine providence shining the light on you. It's you get up every day and you brush your teeth, and then you go do the thing that helps you be the best person, or bring the thing to the world that you're supposed to be bringing there.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts? How I really this? Well, I don't know. This is such a hard thing for me to talk about. I'm going to go ahead and do it. It's such a touchy thing. We've already danced around it. The censorship that's happening. What seems to me to be some kind of inversion of truth. Right. I've been a registered independent since I was 18 years old. Something about all along I was like, I'm both sides, and at the same time, majoritively identified with progressive ideology. And the flip that seems to have occurred, where now censorship is being openly promoted by this radical left, by this religion, as you speak to. What do you do? How do you see this unfolding? Do you see this as a fight? Do you see this as things naturally we use the tools at hand to disseminate information? Or do you have any thoughts on how this moves through culture over the next, 5 years or 10 years?
I think it's ending.
Okay.
I do. I think, you're in a time, we've been in a time of thesis, antithesis, and we'll hit synthesis. And the antithesis is just going to be chaos, which it has been. And I wrote a paper on, sort of like the malady that infects both sides. It's the same malady, but it presents differently. and how everyone's saying, oh, this one has this. Well, but it has this one over here. They're the exact same thing. And that the criminal in it isn't either side, it's duality. And that's the issue. And so I think, but I think more importantly, and this is probably a deeper conversation, AI is going to change a lot. We will be living in fiction. And part of me feels like we've all been living in such painful fiction for so long, the stories and the propaganda, preparing us to live in real fiction.
So how do you, that's very curious to me that you say that you think that it's ending, that we're reaching synthesis, but then it sounds like at the same time you see a lot of potential for further gaslighting or complete deception.
Oh, no. I think it's going to be, there just won't be reality in a certain way. I think it'll be, in the not too, I'm in Silicon Valley, so I'm pretty steeped in the happenings. My ex is one of the founders of Singularity University, and he's wonderful. His father did the first psychedelic studies at UCSF and was good friends with Sasha Shulgin, so he's got a good mix. Okay. And he talks a lot about the fact that we're just loosening all of our understanding of reality and how it works, because no one will have written anything soon. None of the videos will be real. Not only will they not be real, they'll be 3 generations from real. It'll be a video that AI made of AIs that made of AI. No actual input of content will be necessary. And there'll be those whose minds, and this is where I think psychedelics came in to prepare people, those whose minds can move without much being unmoored. And those who can't, who will suffer, who have fixity of ideas. But I think we'll get to choose if it's heaven or hell, if that makes sense. If you go with it, I think it'll be fascinating.
Yeah, I completely agree. It just, I'm curious how we navigate the what seems to be growing misinformation, and if it is continually presented to us in more convincing ways, right, then it's almost like we get a lot of your thoughts, or like that's what gaslighting is, right? Canceling your own thoughts. Like, no, you're not seeing what you're seeing.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's just really curious to me how we move through this. And then, so we watched the cancel culture starting, and we saw it get really heavily picked up by media, and then it kind of became the cool thing to do. And now it's like the cool thing to do right now, it seems like, starting out anyway, is who can create the most convincing AI of who has the most people at their rally or whatever it might be, and I don't know, I'm really curious how you're thinking that we're breaking through, and I don't know, I don't see how that can be right now. It's definitely my hope, but it feels like more and more we're being told that reality is not what it is.
Oh, for sure. But reality is not what it is.
Well, that's true. Yeah, yep. You're right.
I mean, they have a more sinister version of it. But, look, I think you have a mind. I have a mind. That can, who was it? Michael Pollan talks about being able to see through the blandishments of propaganda, and it's like we have minds that can do that. And so there's a certain amount of frustration we feel seeing it, but there's also a certain amount of, psychic wealth that we get to have because we aren't employing all of our attention into the machine, right? You know, I see the corn chips, so I eat the corn chips, but then I feel fat. So then I watch the, you know, commercial on losing weight, and then I buy that. And, you know, that kind of never ending machine, that circle that you get stuck in, we aren't in that. And that's a blessing. And it's painful to see that people are. I mean, I think, you know, I might have, I have practical equanimity in with respect, and that I know, like, people only move as fast as their karma moves. So, you know, my prayer is always that everyone has clear vision, and it'll only happen as it happens. That, you know, and then ultimately we know it's like it's an illusion.
Yeah, I guess this is it's interesting watching myself reflect on my desire to bring about change. Like that's been the motivating force and all of my work, you know, is to try to help make the world a better place. And most of that has been the source of the fuel of most of that has been things are so screwed up, they need to change. And I feel like this, as I feel myself moving more into this feminine energy in my work, I'm recognizing that more of my experience is to allow and smile into it and know that this is just part of the process. And if I can crack a joke, have some fun on the ride.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the kindest thing you can do for other human beings is to be happy. Because just, you know how they say the vagus nerve and depression is contagious and stress is contagious? So is happiness.
For sure. Yeah, I have a feeling that this experience that we've shared to some extent and being canceled, it has prepared me in ways to be a light for others, but I feel like I'm maybe 3/4 of the way out of it. Right. I still have a fair amount of like wanting to be proven right. Like I want, because like, I mean, I was on track within the psychedelic community, and then all of a sudden it's just like everything was yanked out.
Sweetheart, you're going to be the superstar. But precisely, you know, the look you just made, like, I don't really care. That's why. And the caring was the caring whether or not you were a superstar is what got removed. And so you were gutted so that you can carry out the promise that you agreed to carry. That's how I look at it anyway. I mean, I don't know, but that's my guess.
No, that makes sense. I mean, what we're doing with Sanctuary right now, in terms of, again, empowering individuals and disrupting this whole psychedelics as top-down therapy, I have a very strong feeling it's going to have a big impact. And so, like, and the other component of that is that we are doing everything we can to knock any kind of guruism out of this. Everybody is their own minister. Everyone is their own, you know, and then bringing that back into conscientious community for integration and support. Right. You don't have to have all that industry that's built around psychedelia. It just disgusted me in Jamaica how all that unfolded. So, you know, it does seem that it will move. It's moving towards better for those that we're trying to help. I guess with your own work, how are you seeing if you are expanded positive impact from your work as a result of this? Are you there yet, or?
Oh, for sure. It's you know, it's going to be big. We know that. Really, you just have to lift the lid a bit. But even as it is, the top whatever lobbyists, researchers, etc., want to work with us while we're having a really bad reputation time. So that's happening. But we also do. We turn prisons to monasteries, and then we also feed 500 people in Harlem a week. And we have it's a 5-star sit-down dinner and it's amazing, right? And so that has really grown, because when when you're hurting, any kind of offering helps you make it through, and so like that, but see, I'm fortunate. So I was 27 and I got the picture of, what, in a sense, what I was to do. And then I saw the rollout of everything that would happen. And so I just kind of keep going along the path, and I don't worry about it. Here's the thing. This is what I'm on the planet to do. There are people who are born with an extra dimension, in a sense. They have some kind of calling on their heart, or they're more sensitive than other people, or there's something in them, but they think it's a defect. And they do all kinds of things to cope with this defect. And it's my job, because I am a strong personality in this way, to say, like, no, it's not what's wrong with you. It's what's right with you. It's your gift.
Yes. To me, you're saying this is amazing, because I have, in the last 2 weeks, told my wife, I kind of have come to this conclusion that I think the work that I do with individuals on a private, small scale basis, I have really come to understand that a huge part of my work that I'm sent here to do is to help people understand that what they've been told is their curse, is their blessing.
Yes, that's it.
And I would be diagnosed as borderline personality. That's fucking nut job, according to them. And it was really working in psychedelic space. And I started to see this years ago, where people who came to me with, some pretty serious diagnoses and mental health issues would come into the psychedelic space, and they would transform into just automatic healers. They were just like, and you could see them moving energy and transmuting for being clairvoyancy and all this stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, we really are medicating genius. Right. We're medicating genius out of people. Is what we're doing.
That's right. Brilliant. That's it. Do you know Malidoma Some's work?
No.
He was a Western shaman, and he would go into mental wards in the United States. He didn't understand what we were doing.
I've heard of this. Yeah.
Yeah, he was phenomenal, and so that is the crux of what I think a certain tier of us are doing.
Mm-hmm. How do you see that in erotic work coming through?
Oh, I think there are women who think they're too dramatic, too much, or they can't keep themselves contained. They need to, the whole series of things that have women just kind of destroy themselves and try to put some kind of corset on, because they can't fit in a tiny, demure idea of what a woman's supposed to be in a non-expressed way with one person for the rest of their lives. And so to say, like, no, that desire is healthy. No, that's beautiful. No, that's actually an extra sense that you have. No, what you're feeling is real. Yeah. So
in engaging with desire, what would you say that they're experiencing their whole self more, and that's giving access to other sensitivities, or
well, to me, desire is it's akin to the guiding force in Buddhism. It's the feminine version of it. And so it's an impersonal or neutral force that, if you tune into it, will lead you all the way to your full, like, Jungian style individuation. Meaning it'll take you through things that you like and don't like. It's impersonal in that way, but it will ensure that you're whole at the end and complete.
So you're familiar with Bashar? Sure. Yeah. So this following your highness excitement, kind of the same vein, following desire. Yeah, this is something that I have woken up to. I, as a very young child, the first kind of discrepancy that I saw in the Bible was that polygamy was condoned, and in all around me it was condemned, and it never made sense. And from the time I was like, I don't know, like fourth grade, I remember reading in fourth grade, and there were just these two girls that I just loved, and I always felt right. I felt in balance when there were two women in my sphere, and I was taking care of them and making jokes and all this. And for decades, anytime I brought this up, it was just riddled with shame, and two marriages ended. And finally, my third, when Courtney and I met, I just was like, I'm not going to live this lie anymore. I'm going to be real to myself. I am not capable of being monogamous, and I don't want to be. And over the years we have developed, and now it feels like how do I say this? It's because it's not about me. I feel it empowering me, but I feel that living this truth is empowering not just me and not just my partners, but our circle of the friends and people around us. People come up to us all the time. We'll be out dancing or whatever, and people come up to us and say, "Oh my God, the three of you are so beautiful together." And you can feel that they are absorbing that kind of truth, radiant truth. And so, yes, it feels like the most important thing that we can do to just come in this world and follow our desire, follow our excitement, and be the truest self that we can be. And I just commend you so much for, there was a part of me that was like, it was working on me. I was like, oh God, especially like Eli told me about, what y'all got coming. I was like, oh, do I really want to have her on my show? Do I really want to expose? Right. And yes, I do. I want, no matter, even if you were a complete fucking degenerate, I still want to, I just want to have a fucking conversation and see, I feel like until someone proves himself to me as, whatever, completely irreversible and there's no redeeming qualities, I still want to have conversation. It absolutely breaks my heart that we don't discuss politics and religion, which are two of the most important, and then sexuality on top of that, the three most important aspects of our lives. So I really thank you and commend you for continuing to show up to this work.
It's been a pleasure, real pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely.
Cathartic. Yeah.
Oh, good. No? I'm happy to be of service in any way, anytime. So if you ever want to follow up conversation, I can be available.
You're sweetie. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Take care. Okay.
All right. Bless you. Bye.
Bye.